Well, good evening, everybody. And very excited for this evening's event. Glad to be here with Rabbi Yonatan Neril joining us from Denver this evening. Just briefly about Rabbi Neril. He's an interfaith environmental advocate, director of an NGO, and a rabbi, of course. He's a founder and current director of the Interfaith Center for Sustainable Development, the ICSD, a nonprofit organization based in Jerusalem, where he's joining us from. He speaks internationally on religion and ecology, spoken at the World Forum at World Economic Forum in Davos, multiple UN climate conferences, the Parliament of World Religion, as well as dozens of houses of worship and podcasts. And speaking in his publications at the Huffington Post and Times of Israel, has stressed the importance of clergy taking a leadership role in the ecological and climate action. He emphasizes how the climate crisis is a spiritual crisis and how living righteously demands ecological responsibility. In December 2023, he was a co-organizer of the first ever Faith Pavilion at a UN climate conference, COP28 in Dubai, which included 65 sessions and 325 speakers. He's also a MA and a BA he got those at Stanford University, and lives with his wife, Shana, and his two children in Jerusalem, where he joined us from, having just been there, he told me, 36 hours ago. So we are super glad to be joined by Rabbi Yonatan Neril this evening.
Okay, so welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here. JCC of Denver is actually right next to the Greek Orthodox Church of Denver, which has a huge gold dome. It looks a little bit like the Dome of the Rock. So this JCC has the unique status of being next to a Greek Orthodox church that looks like the Dome of the Rock. So I, first of all, would like to welcome you all and thank you for joining us, those who are coming in person now and those who will be watching this online. And so I'm going to share with you a presentation about what do Jewish teachings have to do with a sustainable humanity. So I'm going to talk about a number of ships, actually about 8 different ships. And the first ship is about drilling underneath one's own seat. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who was a rabbi in the times of the Mishnah, which was about 2,000 years ago, 1,900 years ago, he gives a metaphor about to people who are sitting on a boat. And the people sitting on a boat entered a boat, and somebody started drilling a hole underneath their own seat. And the person said, well, what's the big deal? I can do whatever I want. I bought passage here on this ship. And the other people say, no, you can't, because you have to think about the rest of us. There's a saying that someone, sort of to give a different example, someone gets on a kayak and starts to make a fire on the kayak, and the kayak starts to catch fire and the person sinks, which goes to show you can't have your kayak and heat it too. So let me ask you, my father, blessed memory, was a psychiatrist. When people hear this teaching of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai of sitting on a boat, a lot of people think that the person was psychotic, and that that there can't be a rational reason for why this person did what they did. But I want to ask you, if you can think for a moment, can you think of a rational reason for why this person drilled underneath their own seat? And feel free to unmute yourself and share if you'd like, or if anyone in the audience wants to share. People think the person was crazy. That's people's first reaction, because why would a person drill underneath their own seat? but can you think of a rational reason? What need did this person have? And what was the strategy that drilling under their seat fulfilled to fulfill that need?
Death wish, sabotage of other passengers.
Okay, so maybe they thought the other passengers were evil and they were, let's say, a secret agent and wanted to sabotage them. Okay, that could be a rational reason. They're just doing their job as a spy or as a saboteur. So you can see in this cartoon that this cartoon is actually based on this parable or metaphor that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai gave. A second question that I'll ask is, what can the people on the ship do to convince the person to change their behavior without tying the person up or throwing them overboard? What can they verbally say to the person to convince them to change? Okay, so they can explain that if you keep drilling underneath your own seat, then there's going to be a hole and it's going to sink and we're going to be all in the water, and you should care about other people. You shouldn't just think about yourself, right? That would be a way of trying to get the person to change. Here's another way of conceiving of what happened. Person says, I'm glad I'm not on that end, but at the end of the day, they end up in the water like the other people. So why is the person drilling underneath their own seat? That was a question that we try to think about, a rational reason for why a person would drill. Maybe to fish, maybe the person was hungry. They forgot to bring food onto the ship and they didn't have another way of getting food on the ship. Another possibility is that the bottom of the ship was hot and they wanted to cool down their feet. And this was the only way of doing it, by getting some cool water. Or maybe they were thirsty and they wanted to drink some fresh water. And again, they didn't have a bottle of water or another means. Or maybe they wanted to drill for oil and gas. Put down a rig, as they do in the Gulf of Mexico, Caspian Sea, Arctic Sea, Antarctic Sea. Maybe they wanted to harvest some seaweed. They brought some rice with them. They already caught a fish. Want to have some sushi. Put it all together. Nuri, wakame. Or maybe they had to go to the bathroom. Had to use facilities. There wasn't a legitimate wash closet. Or maybe it was occupied. Those are all rational reasons for why a person would drill underneath the road seat. So the second question about what accounts for the person's disregard of other people's welfare. Why didn't the person care? Can you think, anyone feel free to unmute yourself, or anyone wants to share. Why didn't this person care? It's sort of equivalent today if you board a plane and someone takes out, a hammer and starts to smash the window. And they say, look, this is my seat. I can do whatever I want. It's hot. I'm here on the tarmac in Las Vegas, Phoenix. It's 120 degrees. Got to get some air in here. The flight's been delayed an hour. So why doesn't the person care that what they're doing is going to affect others?
Just removed from the impact that it has on the other people. They don't actually see it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they don't see the impact that it's going to have. So maybe they think a small hole won't cause real damage. They can't see the impact. It's a small hole. I just got to get a little water, got to get a little cool water here. They don't think that this is going to cause a big impact. Or maybe they can't think about anything beyond their immediate need. They really have to eat. They really have to drink. They really have to go to the bathroom. And it doesn't really matter what happens. They got to do this right now. Or they think the problem is long-term. If the ship sinks, it won't happen for a long time. And by the time it happens, they'll be off the ship and someone else will, have to deal with it, but it's not their problem. Those are all reasons why the person isn't really concerned. Now, in regards to the other question about what can the person on the ship do to convince this person to change their behavior, his or her behavior, so they can meet the person's need in a way that does not involve drilling. If the person is hungry, give the person some food. If the person is thirsty, give them something to drink. If the person has other needs, then meet that need in a way that doesn't involve harming the ship. Another thing is that the people can explain to this person that the person's action will harm themselves too. They're on the ship as well, and they need to be concerned about what happens. Another thing that people on the ship can do is they can tell the person their action impacts other people, and they shouldn't just think about themselves. They should think about the other people who are on the ship. So that's ship number one, which, since the Midrash says it was said in the name of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, I will call it Rabbi Shimon's ship. Ship number two is a ship that's perhaps the most famous ship in history, which is Noah's Ark. Here are the animals on Noah's Ark: lions, tigers, and bears, giraffes. This is an infographic that my organization worked on. I direct the Interfaith Center for Sustainable Development in our Jewish Eco Seminars branch. Why did the lion lie down with the lamb? So the simple reason is because God said to people in the first chapter of Genesis, chapter 1, verse 30, verse 29, eat plants. That's what God said to people. The next verse, God said to animals, eat plants. And the next verse, God said it was very good. What was very good? The lion lay down with the lamb. Life did not take life to sustain life. Here in Denver, I was with my cousins, and they ordered from Brooklyn Pizza. And for the first time in my life, I saw a Jew eating a kosher slice of sausage pizza. It was vegan sausage, plant-based sausage. So it was quite an experience. It's a new phenomenon. Vegan pizza that has fake meat. Therefore, from a kosher perspective, it's not milk and meat together. For those who aren't familiar with the Jewish laws of milk and meat. So here is a short clip from the trailer. Russell Crowe is Noah.
What did he say?
He's going to destroy the world.
Talking about God. God said,
My father said that one day, if man continued in his ways, the Creator would annihilate this world.
Not be first.
He speaks to you. You must trust that he speaks in a way that you can understand.
I saw water. Death by water. Great flood is coming. We build a vessel to survive the storm. You want?
You don't know your king.
There isn't anything for you here.
I have made up my back, and you stand alone and defy me.
I'm not alone.
the press says, each of us is Noah.
They come. They will be desperate, and there will be many.
I see how hard this was for you.
Remember, Noah, he chose you for a reason.
This is the end of everything.
Rabbi Nachman of Breslov says that the stories of the Torah are not ancient stories about characters that lived long time ago and that are, sharing some historical message. Each of us is Noah. Each of us is Naamah, Noah's wife. And in our times, the flood is coming. Scientists actually have been saying this for 120 years. The first theory of climate change was developed in 1896 by a Swedish chemist named Arrhenius, who was awarded the Nobel Prize in chemistry for this theory of climate change. We've had 120 years. And the rabbis say in the Midrash, the Jewish tradition, that the people of Noah's generation made fun of Noah. When 120 years before the flood, God said that God would bring the ark and the people needed to repent. And Noah started planting a forest to build the ark, and the people laughed at him. And then he cut down the trees, and they said to him, "What are you doing?" He said, "There's going to be a flood." They laughed at him. And then when the rain started to come, as the trailer shows, the people came and they said to Noah, "We're not letting you on the ark." And according to the Midrash, the Jewish tradition, the lions, tigers, and bears saved Noah at that moment. Yesterday on the plane, I watched Avatar. And I actually watched Avatar first part a few years ago, and I watched the rest of it. And there's this powerful scene of where these alien indigenous people are essentially outgunned by the human military. And at that moment where the indigenous people are being defeated by these gunships and these like robot humans, these wild animals come and just charge and save the indigenous people. It's a powerful moment of that when the people merit it, the animals come to their defense. But the Midrash says that if people merit, then people are given stewardship over creation. But if people don't merit it, then they're taken down by the animals. And you can see that also with the coronavirus. Why didn't Noah go fishing? Well, because there were only 2 worms. And if he used up both worms, then there wouldn't have been other worms after the flood. Which animal was Noah distrustful of? The cheetah. He was afraid he was going to get cheated by the cheetah. Where did Noah keep his bees? In the archives. Where did Noah put the penguins on the ark? In the Arctic section. You see, my fine feathered friends, the ecological crisis is so overwhelming that some people get despaired. Some people despair, especially young people, but even older people. So therefore, we've got to mix it up. As it says in the book of Psalms, serve God with joy. So even despite the climate breakdown that's taking place in front of our eyes, we still got to serve God with joy. People save the animals, and the animals save people. It's a two-way street. The cosmic karma of the climate crisis. What did the people of Noah's generation do to trigger God to destroy almost all life on earth? It's the only time in the Bible, Reb Shmuley, that God destroys almost all life on earth. No other time in the Bible does God do such a thing. Even with Sodom, God only destroys the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. So there's a midrash from the Jewish tradition that people would go to a market, like the Machane Yehuda market in Jerusalem, and everyone would steal a peanut. They go to a store, they steal an almond, and the vendor would call the police. And the police would come and they would say, Hach mir nishtin sheinik. Don't knock on my tea kettle in Yiddish. Which, in other words, why are you bothering me? Because if someone steals a peanut, I can't arrest the person. The system of law is not responsive to a situation of where someone steals a peanut. I can't arrest them. I can't put them in jail. I can't bring them to a court of law and put them in prison for stealing a peanut. It's less than 5 cents, or less than 1 cent. And so, but when everyone does that, and everyone goes around the market and steals a little bit from each store, so then God decides that this whole society needs to go. Because it doesn't have the moral integrity at the smallest level. Life on earth depends on small acts by billions of people. When billions of people turn on the ignition, the climate changes. Now that billions of people are living the American dream, which used to only be lived by millions of people in America when my grandparents were alive. You know, when my grandfather was born in 1911, there were about 2 billion people on Earth. In 1800, there were 1 billion people. When my father was born in 1940, I believe there were 4 billion. When I was born in 1980, there were 6 billion. And we're essentially adding 1 billion people now every 11 or 12 years. And now we're at 8.1 billion. And not only that many people, but we have hundreds of billions of machines. Ship number 3 is the ship Titanic, taking you back to 1912, April of 1912. We gotta keep it interesting here. So I'll show you another clip.
Yes, what you see? Iceberg, right ahead! Thank you. Right ahead! Up that opens up!
Okay, so you're all familiar with the story. Captain Smith, who's pictured here on the right, was one of the best captains. He was warned about icebergs ahead, so why did he sail full steam ahead? Yeah, he didn't believe the warnings, or he thought, you know, what's the worst that'll happen? That we'll hit the iceberg, but we'll either go, we'll knock it down. This ship is unsinkable. We'll just punch through it. And this was based on the belief that industrial society is stronger than nature. This was the biggest ship built in history. 4 towering steam exhaust pipes. He thought he would be able to avoid a collision in time, yet they only had 35 seconds after spotting the iceberg. From when the time they spotted it to when the time they hit it, they tried to steer clear. The first lieutenant did, because Captain Smith was actually sleeping. But what happened is that they actually ended up puncturing 6 of the 16 compartments. And the Titanic was only designed to withstand punctures from 5 of the 16 compartments. So had they hit it straight on, I mean, we don't actually know how big the iceberg was, but had they hit it straight on, there's a chance that they would in fact have smashed it. But because they dealt it a glancing blow, they ended up, dooming their fate, according to some ship scientists, because this is actually the most studied ship in history, perhaps aside from Noah's Ark. What is the tip of the iceberg? So the metaphor, of the iceberg is an important one for our current society. And so in our society, we have the underlying issues are much deeper: greed, apathy, arrogance, and instant self-gratification. Those are the issues that are motivating the ecological crisis. It's not just about carbon or decarbonization. Therefore, spiritual solutions are key. And this is why I came here to the JCC, across, as I said, from the Eastern Orthodox Golden Dome. We're here in the spiritual heart of Denver, the spiritual heart of the Rockies, the tallest mountain range in North America, the 14ers. What does it mean that spiritual solutions are key? This involves living with intentionality, finding spiritual satisfaction, and slowing down. Those are spiritual roots of the ecological crisis. As Pope Francis said in his encyclical Laudato Si on care for our common home, part of the crisis is about rapidification. And so I would say that religion at its essence should be a guide to living sustainably and simply, focused on seeking wisdom, meaning, and spirituality. That's what religion at its essence should be. Religion at its worst is about promoting violence, about killing infidels, about condemning other people. And it's a shame that in the world we see, sometimes the face of religion at its worst. But religion at its best, and what it needs to live up to in the ecological crisis, can be a guide for us to have a sustainable path. So we need religious institutions and clergy to mobilize individuals for ecological action. This is one of my favorite photos, aside from my family photos, of course. This is a picture from an interfaith event that my organization co-organized at COP27, the 27th UN Climate Conference that took place a year and a half ago in Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. Here we have an indigenous woman next to a religious Sikh, next to a Brahma Kumari, next to a Muslim imam, next to Christian priests, and a bishop, and a Catholic priest, and a rabbi, and an Episcopal bishop, and evangelical, and Hindu, and a Native American. There's a lot of religious diversity here holding hands together for climate action. This is the promise of interfaith climate action. The other is a brother of a different mother, sister of a different mister. It's not about us versus them. It's about us and them and how we find common cause with each other. 85% of people on earth identify with a religion, and religious institutions have huge educational, media, and philanthropic reach. Religion is the biggest NGO on planet Earth, and it's a sleeping giant in terms of ecological action, which leads me to ship number 4. What is ship number 4? It shows Jonah and the repentance of Nineveh, which was the pictures of a ship that has wind sails and next to a whale. Many of you are familiar with the story of Jonah. God said to Jonah, "Go to the people of Nineveh and tell them to repent. And if they don't repent, then God will destroy the people of Nineveh," which was a big city in what is today Iraq, and Mosul. It was a city that was at one point occupied by Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, ISIS. When Jonah prophesied to the leaders and the people of Nineveh, why did they change their behavior? What was it about Jonah's prophecy that caused them to change? Whereas in the prophecy of Moses, he went to Pharaoh and said, "Let my people go." And Pharaoh didn't listen. Pharaoh hardened his heart. And then God hardened Pharaoh's heart. The Midrash says that Pharaoh survived the splitting of the sea and became the king of Nineveh. Amazingly, Pharaoh survived. He was the only Egyptian to survive, according to this Midrash. And he became the king of Nineveh, and he repented, and he caused Nineveh, the capital of Assyria, to change course and avert God's wrath. Pharaoh learned that if you mess with God, your society is destroyed. And when the prophet of God approaches and says, "Repent or die," you listen to the prophet. You repent. Here are the ships sailing around planet Earth. And the next ship that I want to mention is Earth. Thinking of the Earth as a ship. We are all on this ship together. We are all drilling small holes on the collective ship through our daily consumption, whether it's turning on a light, whether it's using an airplane. I might make a Facebook post about my flights yesterday. It was like my first time flying in 7 months. I try to minimize my flying and to maximize my speaking opportunities and my engagement with people by going on fewer trips. But nevertheless, I did have a carbon footprint yesterday, and the carbon that was released from the airplane that I flew on will stay in the atmosphere for around 100 years. Religious teachers can help us to think long-term, to moderate consumption, to find greater pleasure in the spiritual and communal. These are spiritual solutions to the climate crisis. And religious teachers can provide those spiritual solutions in a way that environmental scientists or politicians or business leaders cannot. Who is God trusting to be the captains of the collective ship that humanity is sailing with 8 billion people and 10 million species and trillions of organisms of diverse life? A lot of people think the captains are the political leaders. Problem is, many of the political leaders are essentially in cahoots with the fossil fuel executives. And so therefore, to trust that the political leaders are going to solve the ecological crisis, I think is misplaced faith. In 1988, world leaders came together and began the UN climate process. That has now continued for 35 years, but every year the problem gets worse. And so therefore, one definition of insanity is trying the same solution over and over again and thinking you're going to get a different outcome. Ship number 6 is the aircraft carrier. Martin Luther King said that there are 3 great evils in the world: militarism, racism, and materialism. We can see that the amount of spending that goes to the militaries is tremendous. Most countries are top heavy with military spending, and the aircraft carrier is actually the machine, the vehicle that's the most expensive of anything. It's more expensive than an F-35. As sea levels rise, the Moskva ship lies at the bottom of the sea. The Moskva was the flagship of Russia's Black Fleet, and the Ukrainians hit it with a Neptune anti-ship missile. And so in some ways, the Moskva represents the arrogance of the Russian Navy. Humanity needs to engage in spiritual work to reduce our aggression toward each other so that people can feel safe and spend less on weapons. There are, I believe, about as many guns in America as there are people. And I was at a Kroger in Ohio, and it said groceries and guns. At the end of the day, the military spending and the personal weapons are not what's going to keep us safe from each other. Because as the climate breakdown continues, people are going to get more and more desperate. And so we need to solve climate change in order to prevent worse things from happening on the planet. And part of that has to do with dealing with our fear of other people, especially people who are different than us. Ship number 7 is the car transport ship. Over the past few years, several car transport ships that have been carrying thousands of vehicles have caught fire, including this one in the North Sea near Denmark in July 2023, a year ago almost. And so this ship is being towed after catching fire, and you can see losing a lot of its paint. There will be 2 billion motor vehicles on the roads by 2030, most of them still powered by fossil fuels, most of them gasoline or diesel powered vehicles. And that means that it'll be double the number of vehicles on the road as existed in 2020. In a course of 10 years or 12 years, humanity is doubling the number of cars. But some Americans are actually realizing that they can do with fewer cars, especially if they're working from home and are able to, or commute to work via bicycle. or train or bus or walking or scooter, electric bike. The way I choose to get around is a spiritual choice. I was in Sweden last year and I met a Lutheran pastor in the city of Gothenburg, which in Swedish is Göteborg. And he rode his bicycle, a human-powered bicycle, not an electric one. He rode it about 15 miles to work every day, rain, snow, or sun. Really quite an example. I actually did a short video with him on my Facebook page. And the last ship that I will share with you about is the human soul. Because really, as the Zohar, the mystical source in the Jewish tradition, teaches the soul is like a ship. Because life has sometimes choppy waters, and the soul needs to guide the body in what way to go. What's the highest path forward? And so the Zohar teaches that there are many levels of soul awareness. There's what's called nefesh, ruach, neshama, chia, yechida, 5 levels of soul awareness. And within those 5 levels, there's actually 5 levels themselves, so 25 levels. The society that humanity has created, consumer society, operates at the lowest level of soul awareness, what you would call nefesh sheba nefesh. And at that level of soul awareness, people are attracted to, Cluck You Chicken and Dunkin' Donuts and Pizza Hut and all these different things that taste good, but after you've eaten a good amount of it, actually gives you a bellyache. So it provides instant self-gratification, but it has consequences both for the person who eats it, as well as for the animals that were needed to produce it and the rest of agriculture. The ecological crisis is also a crisis of religion, meaning it's not just about the birds and the bees, the trees and the toads. It's about how we live as spiritual beings in a physical reality. What can be done and what can we do? This is from an interfaith event that took place in London that released 10 spiritual principles for climate action. Communities have the power to affect change. Through the group 350, Colorado contributed to the EPA decision to deny Suncor oil refineries Title IV air quality permits, citing recent environmental concerns. This happened in the city of Denver. So that's an example of a positive environmental change right here in Denver to reduce refineries in this area. Interfaith climate action is a powerful voice, and this voice needs to be strengthened in our times. This is another photo of a diversity of people. Clergy. Here's a picture of a range of rabbis. Clergy can inspire people to appreciate altruism rather than physical consumption. And again, this is a message that clergy are uniquely positioned to deliver more so than environmental scientists or business leaders or politicians. Some houses of worship are introducing gardens, composts, vegetarian and vegan food offerings, eco-preaching, and more. Just past Denver Academy of Torah, which has next to it a big garden. It's quite a nice sight to be seen, and there's other examples of this, of houses of worship, synagogues, making gardens and compost in their house of worship. How do we prioritize our efforts? The evangelical climate scientist, Dr. Catherine Hayhouse, gives the example of a bucket that has a lot of holes in it. And it's essentially equivalent to the holes in the bucket are the ecological challenges, like climate change, biodiversity loss, etc. If we don't solve these sustainability challenges, then the other successes that we will have achieved, whether it's in disability access or in equal rights for different peoples, or educational opportunities, all of these other successes will go down the drain if we don't have a sustainable planet to live on. And so that's why we need to prioritize sustainability, even though sustainability represents only about 2% of climate philanthropy. And within that, 2% of overall philanthropy goes to environmental causes. Young people care more about ecology than theology. So this is an opportunity to make religion relevant to youth. And so I've co-authored a book, Eco Bible, which is an ecological commentary on the Torah. It's available on Amazon. It's 400 verses. I brought with me some copies that were printed in Oregon, not so far away. And I would be happy to sell these copies, but they're also available in bookstores and on Amazon. I'll be giving another talk in Denver at Barnes & Noble on July 14th at noon. That'll be focused on Eco Bible. My organization, the Interfaith Center for Sustainable Development, engages seminaries to train emerging clergy to teach on religion and ecology. We've organized about 10 conferences to bring together seminary deans and faculty, including one for West Coast, for Western seminary faculty that took place a few years ago in Los Angeles. This past December, my organization was a co-organizer of the first Faith Pavilion at the UN Climate Conference in Dubai, and we also co-organized an interfaith and indigenous peoples walk. And this is also one of my favorite pictures from that. And we're planning to do further interfaith engagement at COP29 in Baku, Azerbaijan, in November. Baku was the site of the first oil well in history, 1841. And Azerbaijan just signed an agreement with the Emirates, which hosted the last UN climate conference, for the Emirates to buy a 30% stake in one of Azerbaijan's leading gas fields to expand gas production for export to Europe. On the other hand, religious institutions can help promote renewable energy. My organization is working on a project in Mozambique to develop, it's called the Faith Inspired Renewable Energy Project. We're working with the Anglican Church of Southern Africa. What are some solutions that we can take on in our own lives in terms of personal change? How can we be the change that we wish to see in the world? As Gandhi said, what can we do? We can eat a vegan or a plant-based diet, or at least be reducitarians, reduce the amount of meat that we take in. We can bicycle, as I said, take public transportation. Earth to humanity, shape up or ship out. Winning too slow on climate change is losing, as Bill McKibben said. We are all on the same boat, and we need all hands on deck, especially the 6.7 people who identify with a religion, which is 85% of people on planet Earth. Jonah went to sleep. Captain Smith was asleep, and we are sleeping or actively suppressing action. And most people actually don't want to hear this message. I consider myself an itinerant preacher. I will continue to share this message, whether it's to 2 people or 200 people or 2,000 people. Because I also believe that when we go upstairs at the end of our lives, hopefully at 120 years, God will ask us, did you do everything you can when everything at stake? And our children will ask us, Father, Mother, what did you do? How did you help? How did you put in your part? And I just want to finish speaking of fathers and mothers with a story that my father of blessed memory loved, which the Nobel laureate Toni Morrison told of a young boy who comes to an elder woman with a bird in his hands. And he says to the woman, can you tell me whether the bird in my hands is alive or dead? And she realized that the boy was playing a trick on her. Because if she said that the bird was dead, then the boy would open his hands and the bird would fly away. And if she said the bird was alive, the boy would close his hands and crush the bird, and she would be wrong. He had her coming and going. And so she thought to herself for a minute, and she said to the young boy, I don't know whether the bird in your hands is alive or dead. All I know is that the life of the bird is in your hands. Thank you for joining today, near and far. So we have a branch, Jewish Eco Seminars, and on the website of jewishecoseminars.com, we have Jewish ecological teachings on a range of topics and links to Eco Bible. This is my email address. And I thank you for joining. The earth is in our hands. That's the message. It's not just about me, it's about all of us. And how do we together use our power? And I just want to bless us that we should use our power to enable the next generation to inherit a thriving, sustainable, and spiritually aware humanity and earth, and for all species.
I guess, I feel, I have a question about the call. Thinking about, generally the message of religious institutions or religion as a whole, as potentially, like you're saying, having the capacity to be the vehicle for change. What does that look like for you? What is that journey, or how does that vehicle get to its target?
Yeah. So humanity has this group of people of tens of millions of people on earth who are clergy, who are ordained clergy, imams, priests, pastors, rabbis, monks. And these are people that people go to for inspiration, for spiritual wisdom, they go to them for weddings and funerals and life cycle events, but they also go to them for inspiration on how to live a life. And so to the extent that a clergy can be someone who preaches about spiritual ecological behavior, that clergy is helping the transition to an ecological civilization, to a civilization where we are essentially connecting spirituality and sustainability, religion and ecology. There's no single word in English that describes this, but it's an idea that's important. And so when a house of worship has compost, when a house of worship chooses to have more of a plant-based diet at their events, when a house of worship puts solar panels or wind turbines on their land, then they show that this is important as a religious act, and they're showing the way for religious adherents to also adopt a similar lifestyle. So this is how, and then tell them to vote for political leaders who support ecological practices. The reality is on earth that most people who are fervently religious vote for political leaders who don't care at all about ecological concern. How could that be? God says in Genesis chapter 2, verse 15, and God placed the human being in the Garden of Eden to serve it and conserve it. So if God's giving us a mandate to serve and conserve the earth, as Rabbi Sachs understood that verse, then how can we vote for political leaders who are just about drill, extract, consume. And so in some ways, there has been a tacit alliance between religion and materialism, that materialism can deliver the pleasure, the instant self-gratification, and religion can just sort of do its thing on the side of hermeneutics and homiletics and theology and liturgy. But the core drive that people have is fulfilled by the iPhone and the burger and the nuggets. So this is something, if we have a transition within religion, if the battle is waged within religion, then we can see a deeper transition.
Well, thanks everybody for joining, and thanks again to Rabbi Neril for inspiring, sharing, hopefully, one more small act and sharing and your message. So thanks for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.